Welcome to the September monthly edition of the Shared Security Show. And joining me are two people who I know absolutely use two-factor authentication, Kevin Johnson and Scott Wright.
No, I don't use MFA on anything. I use 4FA.
4FA. You're even more.
And you in high school, you probably had a quadraphonic stereo system too.
Oh, totally. And I base 64 encrypt everything.
Because that's encryption. So before we get started, I wanted to give you a shout out, Kevin, for your CISSP course coming up. Pay what you want, pay what you can.
I'm excited about it. Here's the funny thing. I don't know how to handle this. So we get asked by people all the time, how many people pass who take it? And so far, we're at 100% pass rate.
That's awesome.
Well, that sounds awesome. But that also sounds like the car was driven by an old lady on Sundays. So we don't know anybody who has attempted to take it that failed, but we also don't have any way to see. So we're like, is that valid marketing to say? Like
there's no evidence that anyone's failed. It's just like a breach report.
Exactly. Nobody has told us. We have a large number of people who have told us they passed. So we feel like, and we have a bunch of people who told us they were taking the test and then told us they passed. But I feel scummy saying we have a 100% pass rate because, yeah, it's a fun one. I like it. This time we expanded it. It's 10 weeks instead of 9. Mainly because the very first reading assignment was boring as anything, and it was too big. So people asked us to split up. Okay, fine. So it's 10 weeks. Yeah, it's pay what you can. And I want to be very clear because we get asked this all the time. There are no limits to the number of free seats we're giving to people who need it. Like,
that's great.
That is, we're like, hey, are there still free seats? Yes, there are still free seats. The whole point of it is other people pay for the course what they can afford, and that enables us to offer it to people who can't. It's a very important thing to me, but thank you very much for mentioning it. I love the program. I'm biased. I'm who created the program. So it's like, I like that thing I came up with.
Well, I think it's great. So I think we need more of that in the industry. So
yeah, we do.
Kudos to you guys for sure. So now let's talk about our topic at hand, which is multi-factor authentication and Authenticator apps.
Yay.
And this has, we've seen a lot of discussion about this going on inside and outside the community, right? We hear on the news all the time of breaches, and we hear about password exposures and other things that, all could have been prevented by implementing a multi-factor authentication on your accounts. And I know there was a recent podcast. It was a cyber podcast by Vice. One of our previous guests, Rachel Toback, was on there talking about this topic. And what kind of spurred me, and I think, Scott, we had talked about doing a show on apps anyway. Yeah. But this topic in particular is interesting because they had said just in the show notes that Twitter recently released some data showing that only 2.3% of their user base have actually implemented it or checked the box to enable multi-factor authentication, which seems scaringly low for Twitter, thinking of how many users. So
I don't know that I agree that that's scaringly low.
That's a new word. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the word though. I can't pronounce it, but I like it. Here's why I'm not worried about it with Twitter. I bet if we dug into Twitter's numbers, the vast majority of their accounts are bots. And I don't necessarily mean bad bots. I mean, like, it's a marketing thing. It's a this thing. It's a, hey, track this thing. And those accounts aren't going to have MFA on. Right. It's very unlikely those are having MFA. What I would like to see, and I have not found any widespread data, and I've looked, what I'd like to see is for accounts like bank accounts or email, like I'd love Google to say how many people have enabled MFA on their email account, right? Because The only reason is I think 2%, you're absolutely right. That's a scary number. But I think it's slightly misleading. I think it's as misleading as me saying 100% of the people who take our class pass this. Right? Like, it is a factual number, but out of context.
So on that same note, I have a question. You just made me think of think of OAuth, right? So is Twitter a client of OAuth or an identity provider for OAuth? I think there are ways where you can say I want to access my Twitter account, but I'm going to do it through Google login, right? Or my Google authentication, right? I think that's an OAuth kind of protocol, right? Isn't it? Are you able to do that? Because if you are, then that, all the people who have set up accounts that are authenticated through an identity provider, it's not even going to be counted, right?
Yeah, I believe Twitter allows that. My account is not tied to my Google account, but I believe that's allowed. But you're absolutely correct. That would not show up as a MFA account, even though my Google account absolutely has MFA on it. But Twitter wouldn't manage that, so they wouldn't know. That's a good point. I guess
you could do kind of a scientific survey with friends and family. And I can tell you that the friends and family I've talked to, I have always have to encourage them to enable two-factor authentication. It's just not part of their kind of security mindset. It's not their fault, but
not even that. Like, so my company, we have a client portal. And our previous version of the client portal supported MFA, but it wasn't required. And very few people, they're logging in specifically to get the results of a security test. Didn't turn on MFA, to the point where our new portal, we actually made it a requirement, because we're like, look, we assumed, wrongly so, that people would turn this on. Now, if you get an account on our portal, until you turn on MFA, you can't actually do anything in the portal. The only thing you can do is authenticate in and turn on MFA. Like, that's it. And if you don't, you have a banner across the top of the screen that basically says, you don't have MFA, so bite me. It doesn't say that, but it should. Right? Turn this on, dang it. So, I mean, like, I would have long said that the majority of the people I work with and everything else like that have MFA on, but I'd be wrong. Even the people who know better don't turn it on.
So maybe before we get into the details, maybe we just take a step back and just explain what do we mean by multi-factor authentication.
Kind of what I was hoping we'd be able to get into. So Rachel described it really well in the podcast that we linked to in the notes. In the sense that, when we talked about a factor, it's really different dimensions of authenticating you. It's either through something something you have or possess, or something that you are, which is like a biometric thumbprint or facial recognition. And so relying on one of those things, typically passwords or something is it's traditionally been the original way to authenticate, but it's clearly not the best way, especially when attackers are now able to pretty easily, break into accounts and steal passwords or have keyloggers or whatever. So any way that a password is compromised kind of makes it very weak if you're only relying on something. And so, as Rachel described, having something that you have is a second dimension, or something that an attacker is not likely to have. Similarly with biometrics. So that's the bottom line. And it clearly is making a difference. I think some of the stats she provided show that it's having a second factor has really reduced the amount of account takeovers, which is the real threat.
And that second factor takes multiple forms, right? As you said, everything from an Authenticator app, which is obviously what we recommend, to an SMS message with a code. And that's one that I always enjoy the rants on Twitter about, that SMS is evil and nobody should offer it. And I always laugh at people who say that.
That is something that I get upset by as well, because text-based, even though there are flaws, it's still better than just using a password. And if that's all you have available to you for a certain account, you should absolutely enable it.
And Rachel did a good job of sort of pointing out it depends on what she called the threat model, right? Which most regular people don't really understand what that means. It's kind of a scary term, but it really just means how likely are you to be targeted? And if you are, then you probably want to go an extra step to prevent it.
Yeah. Well, and I've pointed out to people before, and I actually just pulled up the report to look at it again to make sure I had the right numbers. I'm always surprised by the fact that in the US, and my understanding is worldwide, the numbers are approximately the same, but the report I'm looking at is the US. In the US, 11% of the people that have a cell phone don't have a smartphone.
Interesting.
And so for that 11% of people, and only 97% of people have a cell phone at all, which my understanding, and we're talking about adults, so the people who come back and say, oh yeah, but toddlers
over
don't have
18.
cell phones.
Yeah.
Right. Over 18, 97% of the people have a cell phone of some type, which I don't know, that in modern times, I'm surprised by that, even if it's only 3%. But 11% of those people don't have a smartphone. So if we turn off SMS, period, if we make that absolute statement,
you eliminate all those people. Yeah.
You eliminate 11% of your user base. I personally think that the biggest reason that MFA is not turned on by so many people, whatever it is, whether it's 2.3% of people, whatever. I honestly believe that the majority of the reason is we make it difficult to do. And I don't mean, if you say, oh, but Kevin, you create your account and you go to the settings and you scan the code. And it's like, yeah, but until we had something like Authy or whatever, and we can talk about clients in a minute, but until we had clients that would back up the seed, right? I had a phone die that had Google Authenticator on it.
Happened to me too.
Yeah. I mean, I woke up one morning and it just didn't work. And put it there, thank you. I had nothing. I had to go turn off 2FA all over the place. I had to reach out to organizations. In a couple of cases, I had to actually recreate accounts because
it sucked.
That there was no way to verify. But beyond that, we bury it, right? Like you create the account and then we hope you'll go back. I think that's the biggest hurdle is we make it a second step. No pun intended. If it was just part of the registration, as you sign up, hey, guess what? You're going to get this QR code and you're going to scan it to move to the next step. And if you decide not to, we're going to ask you 47 times whether you're
That
positive.
sounds like something Google would do.
Yeah.
Why haven't they done it yet?
Very few organizations do it. And so part of me says, okay, what am I missing? Because I'm not that smart. But, it's the idea of I want access to this account. I create my account. I do my thing. And yeah, I may log into that system every day or once a day or once a week or whatever. But every time I log into the system, whatever it is, I'm there to do something, not go configure my account. Yeah. Right. And so
it's not convenient.
That's what I mean by hard, right? We haven't thought through what does the UX people say? The user story for making this as efficient as possible. Right. I think that's the biggest problem. We've just, it's not that people don't care. It's not that, and here's the funny part in my mind. It's the easiest problem to fix. Fix your app. You don't have to convince your users. Fix your app.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of apps that don't even support authentication.
For the longest time, the fact that my Chase account did not support MFA, but my World of Warcraft one did.
I remember that conversation.
I say that all the time. Like my virtual gold was more protected than my real gold. I know for the people who are going to write in, we aren't on the gold standard anymore. But it always bothered me. Like, man, my Xbox account has multi-factor authentication, but
Are you looking for the very best products to protect your digital privacy? Well, Silent Pocket has everything you need with their patented product line of high-quality Faraday bags, backpacks, clutches, and wallets. Visit silentpocket.com today and receive 10% off your order by using discount code SHAREDSECURITY.
You want your organization to be secure and compliant and to have a healthy culture, but your employees' lack of awareness makes you vulnerable to data theft, fraud, and compliance penalties. It's frustrating that the boring static training content that's being used today has failed to improve employees' ability to defend against cyber attacks. At ClickArmor, we know that without using gamification, it's extremely hard to get staff to understand how to avoid threats. Our gamified simulations and challenges have provided a 50% average improvement in thousands of employees' ability to spot phishing threats. Go to clickarmor.ca/sharedsecurity to get your free gamified phishing assessment for up to 500 employees. You'll see quickly how gamified simulations can help your team be more resilient and compliant and help avoid costly ransomware and fraud incidents. Let ClickArmor help you go from being an underappreciated, stressed out fall guy to being an innovative leader who's the catalyst for greater productivity in your organization.
Yeah. So let's talk about just maybe some differences in the different types of multi-factor authentication. We kind of mentioned text-based. That's pretty easy to explain. You get a text message, right? You put a code in, but there's also the Authenticator apps, which we can talk about. But then the other side too is the security keys. So the Ubico keys. There's
RSA security tokens.
Or you actually put a USB device. You have to have it plugged into your computer or your laptop, right?
Or NFC now.
Or NFC, right?
Yep.
Or Bluetooth. Yeah, there's different ways of providing that factor. And that's usually what they say for your highest tier of multi-factor authentication is the physical key. Is for if you had a risk profile, right? That necessitated something like that. Not everybody, but like you had said, Scott, depending on who you are and what you do, may necessitate a greater level of multi-factor authentication.
I would throw a different option in there as well. The system, right? Like, even if you don't believe you're under attack, there is a much higher likelihood that your email account or your bank account will be targeted as part of the broad
just randomly
systems like that, right?
Absolutely.
And
totally
so
right.
Using like a Authy token for the majority of your systems, but to get a hardware token to log into your bank, I think is a good idea. Is it necessary? No. The Authy token is going to do well for most people, but why not? These tokens are inexpensive. I mean, I have a bunch of them. Right? Like,
and once you start using them,
that send them to us for jobs and
they're
stuff.
pretty convenient. After you use them a couple times, it's not that big of a deal. So let's talk about apps, Authenticator apps, Scott. Because I know you have there's a story you wanted to share.
Here's the one that, I've got 5 apps right on my.
Well, and we all do. Yes, because that's one of the problems, right? Which we should talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize when I first started using Authenticator apps that they weren't all the same. I mean, more or less, right? So first one was Google Authenticator, and then I use LastPass for passwords. And LastPass has this cool thing where when you try and log in, it just puts a little flag on your app and you just push the button. You don't have to enter any codes. So that was cool too, but I didn't realize it was actually compatible. I could have done all of the authenticators in that app, right? Until Microsoft came out with its Authenticator app, which of course is different and set me back, right? So, yeah. But what you guys like about Authy is the ability to back up those accounts, right?
Yeah. And Authy isn't the only one that has it. LastPass offers the same thing. My understanding is the new version of Google Authenticator does as well, but I had already switched to Authy. When that phone died, I switched to Authy at that point because it was like,
So what happens literally if you're using Google Authenticator and you lose your phone? What what do you have to do to get back to normal?
Depends on the system. So for Google Authenticator, that one was actually easy for me because we have an enterprise account. And so I went to one of the other enterprise admins. They turned off MFA for my account and we coordinated, right? I was at my computer. I was able to get in at that point. He turned it off. I logged in and immediately turned it back on. So there was a 45-second period that if you knew my account, you could have gotten in at that point.
But if you don't happen to have an enterprise account, what's the process?
Then in that case, it depends on the system. So for example, let's break the other side, right? My AWS account, I am the root account. Now I don't use that root account daily, right? We use it to control the system and billing and stuff like that. That has MFA on it. My phone died. I lost Authenticator. I needed to get in. For that, I had to actually reach out to Amazon. And there was, I don't remember all of the details, but it was a multiple step process with multiple mechanisms to communicate. It wasn't just call this number and convince the person on the phone to turn it off, right? And in at least one other case, I had to have my accountant verify who I was.
With Google, maybe you just need to do a CAPTCHA.
Well, click. Which ones are railroad tracks?
Yeah, it does back it up for you, but
it depends on the system. But like I said, in at least one, I had to have my accountant write a letter that said this is me and to gain access to that account again.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that we would recommend just out of this podcast is whatever authenticator app you're using or multiple apps, make sure they have some type of backup procedure. Right. If your phone dies or you lose your phone, whatever.
And don't forget that most MFA systems, when you register, they say to you, hey, here's 5 backup codes that you want to store. Don't do what I did and go,
put them in your
I'm
LastPass.
not going to need those.
Ignore it.
I'm not going to need those. What are you talking about? Why would I need backup
codes?
Or
you put them in your LastPass, which actually has 2-factor authentication requiring the device.
I now save those. We have a gun safe that I print them out and they're in the safe. And I note on them which site they're for and which system they're for, because that's the other problem you'd run into. They're just codes.
That's like having 6 RSA tokens. Which one was this for?
Which is the right one of these? Yeah. Oh man. We get, customers send us keys all the time to use to get into their systems, and keeping track of which customer's key that is. And that's annoying.
Maybe you just need one of those cases like we used to have 20 years ago for, all your keys for your facility.
Hanging out. Yeah. So I use my laser cutter to engrave a keychain per customer and I tag it on there. But that's just because I like my laser cutter.
Yes. Show us your bat again.
I'm sorry, what? Oh, my bat.
There we go.
I painted them.
Oh. There it is.
So
very nice.
I don't know about nice, but I'm enjoying the laser cutter. It's quite nerdy.
And I know, Scott, I counted the number of authenticator apps I have, and I have 4.
Okay.
And I would love to consolidate down to one, like use Authy, but there's things like that, like Microsoft Authenticator. And we just talked on the show about how Microsoft now allows you to log into Windows with multi-factor authentication, but they only offer you text and Microsoft Authenticator.
Yeah.
And I have security key, of course, but
am I the only one here with a BattleNet authenticator? Because I didn't see one on Scott's phone.
I don't even know what it is.
I don't play BattleNet for gaming.
Man.
Yeah. Blizzard. Yeah.
How do you play Diablo?
The new Diablo coming out, Diablo 2, right? They're remaking it.
Just because I run a gamification company doesn't mean I'm a gamer, okay?
I'm not a gamer either, but I really enjoy video games. I just suck at them.
I just don't find time to play video games. That's my problem.
No time for that.
That's right. That's right. But yep.
I think the biggest recommendation is go turn on MFA everywhere you can. And if you have an account that doesn't support MFA, complain to the place that gives you that account.
It's a good point, because even Rachel pointed out, so she doesn't expect everybody's going to enable it on everything, but her recommendation is anywhere where it's allowed, you should at least consider what information you have put into that account, because that's really the problem, right? Is what can be targeted.
Yeah, not just the information you put in there, though. In my opinion, you should also think about what information they have access to.
Yeah, what the
Because,
access is to. Yeah.
like, bad example, because it's so obvious to most people, but, you know, I don't put very many things sensitive in my personal email account. I don't use it for work. I don't do anything like that. But I have accounts that use that account. And those systems may have sensitive stuff in them. And so if they compromise that email,
that's a great point.
Getting access to the other things, and don't fall for the thing of, well, who's going to attack me? I'm nobody, right? Like, no, they're attacking everybody.
You can be a stepping stone.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Your email account is, I think, just as critical, if not more critical than your online banking account.
If you do a search, I don't know how recently, but usually somebody will post, what's the value of a Google account on the black market, or, something like that. Right. And the email accounts are the highest, because that's where the root of trust is for everybody's accounts for account recovery.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Turn it on, dang it.
So we'll have all this linked in our show notes, including that podcast with Rachel. We're big fans of Rachel. She's doing awesome stuff, and we should get her back on the show too, because it seems like we get her on once a year. I think.
Just make sure she's authenticated, but that's fine.
We'll have to find a way to authenticate Rachel on the show.
Are you really? Tell me your code.
My face is my password. My voice is my password. All those, but. Yeah, great conversation. And, this is what we do on the monthly show, is really take a topic like this and, explain things out a little bit more, offer some good advice and things like this. And like I said, multi-factor authentication is one of those things that hopefully we can revisit maybe in a couple of years, and maybe it'll be different numbers, right? Hopefully. Showing adoption across different platforms.
Yep.
Hopefully. Yeah. So. All right, guys. Well, that's all for this month's show. Want to thank you both for joining me as always. And thank you to all of our listeners as well. And we'll be back next week and next month, of course, with another episode.
Have a great day and a great life.
Enjoy yourself. Thanks for having us.
Enjoy your life.
Enjoy your life. Your two-factor life.
Thanks, everyone.